Hey filmmakers, in this video I'm going to discuss exactly how film distributors work in 2025 and what to look out for in the distribution deals to make sure that you get the best deal. Let's dive straight in. So firstly, how do most distributors work in 2025? It's important to note that most film distributors, when it comes to indie film distribution, will focus on online-only releases. This means that they will take your film and they will use an aggregator, most likely, in order to put it on various different streaming platforms, such as Tubi, such as YouTube, such as Apple TV and Amazon, and so on. Most distributors, indie film distributors, will also be working with aggregators because they will not have personal relationships with those different streaming platforms, which means that on top of their own fees, they will also be charging you aggregator fees. We'll dive into all of that in just a minute. But first and most importantly, there is one thing to keep in mind, which is what is the end game for most indie film distributors? And that is actually not to keep being a distributor. Most indie film distributors are looking to at some point be bought by a bigger distributor. Now, that means what they are trying to achieve is to get as many films onto their portfolio, onto their slate, and have those films on there for as long of a period of time as possible, because that will mean that they will be able to be sold to a bigger distributor for a much higher amount. That means that they are not necessarily interested in making you the most money or even themselves the most amount of money from your films, but they are just looking to bring on board the highest volume of films as possible for as long of a term as possible. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you are dealing with distributors. Now, when it comes to distribution deals and contracts, there are quite a few different ways in which distributors will be interested in making themselves more money rather than you more money or the film more money. And they will be trying to put points into the contract in order to make sure that they make as much profit as possible. They are a business and they are trying to make profit for that business, not necessarily for you as a filmmaker. And that's what we're going to discuss here next. So there are a couple of key contract points to look out for. The first and most important is the revenue split. How much money are they keeping from the sales and how much is going directly to you as a filmmaker? Now, this will traditionally be anywhere from 25 to 50%. So distributors will keep 25 and 50%, and the filmmaker or the film will keep 75 to 50%. 25 is a pretty good deal. There are a few, but there are some distributors that go as low as 20. One of them is called Indie Rights, but most distributors will not go as low as 20%. It will usually start at 25% and it will go up to 50%. If any distributor is asking you for any more than 50%, that is going to be a terrible contract. Do not sign that. Even anywhere that's over 40% is already quite high. I would try and get the distributor to agree to about 25 to 30%. Then there are recoupable marketing costs, which I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a moment. But essentially, a distributor has their own marketing costs. They will go to Cannes, they will go to AFM to promote your film. Some of them will be creating posters and marketing materials for your film. So they have marketing costs that they need to recoup, which means that the first money that comes in from the sales of your film will most likely not be split with that 25-75% split, but will actually go 100% to the distributor to cover their costs. And then there is the length of term. Again, there are some distributors that might go as low as 3 years in terms of the length of term, but most distributors will try to go between 5 and 8 years. That tends to be tends to be a medium. But some distributors will try to get your film for perpetuity or for 25 years or for a really, really long period of time. Now, if a distributor is asking you for a length of term that's more than 8 years, there is just no need for that. So I would never sign a contract that goes over and beyond that 8-year period. Now, fees. There are going to be a variety of different ways in which distributors will try to make money off of the film, for their own business rather than for you as a filmmaker by charging a variety of different fees. The first one that a lot of distributors will try to add into their contract is uncapped marketing costs. Now, as we discussed just a minute ago, there are a variety of different reasons why distributors need to charge certain amounts of marketing costs, because they do have costs for promoting your film, they have costs for creating marketing material, and therefore they need to recoup some of those costs first. But if you have uncapped marketing costs in your agreement, you are 95% likely to never see any money whatsoever from that film. You have to put a cap on the marketing costs. If you do not, that essentially means that most distributors will be able to just say, yes, your film made a couple $100,000, but our marketing expenses were a couple $100,000. Therefore, unfortunately, you do not keep any of that money. This is why it's so important to put a cap on those marketing costs. Usually distributors will try and place that quite high at around $25,000, but I would really try and rein that in if you have a low budget film to something much, much smaller. They might also be charging you interest on any of those upfront marketing costs. So for example, if their upfront marketing costs are $5,000, they might be charging you a 10% interest per year while you try and recoup that through the sales of the films, which means that by the end, you might be paying $6,000 in marketing costs rather than $5,000. That's something that I personally don't agree with. I don't believe there should be an interest on that. So I would always try to exclude that from the contract. Then there's various admin fees. To be perfectly honest, I would always exclude that from the contract and make sure that you do not sign a contract that has vague admin fees on there. They are percentage. They're 20 to 50% of the sales. That is the admin fee. That is the fee for doing everything, such as, putting your film up onto various platforms, marketing, and so on. So there really shouldn't be any additional admin fees. And then the other thing to keep in mind is, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, most distributors do not have relationships with platforms such as Tubi. Now, streaming platforms such as Tubi do not deal with individual filmmakers. So they only deal with a handful of distributors that they have relationships with or aggregators. This means that on top of your 25 to 50% fee that you will be paying your distributor, you will in addition most likely be paying aggregation fees. So a distributor might go through a platform such as FilmHub to get onto Tubi. FilmHub will charge 20%, which means suddenly that 25% turns into 45%, that 50% turns into 70%, and that means that barely anything is left for you. So I would always double check whether the distributor is going to be dealing with the streamers directly, or whether you will have to paying aggregation or further distribution platform fees. Now, there are a few other points to look out for. First one, there is something that is absolutely ridiculous that distributors have started to add into contracts, which is that you are not allowed to terminate the contract with the distributor, even if the distributor is in breach of the contract. As I mentioned, a lot of distributors' end game is to be sold to another distributor, in which case their value will really depend on how long the term is. So if you ever see something where it says that the length term is perpetual, meaning you are going to, essentially give away the film to that distributor forever, I would never sign that contract. Also, you might have a particular contract which says that the length of term is 5 years, but it will be followed by a clause that unless the distributor decides not to move forward, you have to renew it for another 5 years, which means that at the end of that 5 years, unless the distributor says that they do not want to continue with your film, you will have no choice but automatically to renew for another 5 years. So you have to watch out for that clause as well. There might also be a lack of a delivery timeline. There are some distributors that, again, because they're more interested in being sold some point in the future, they will actually just take on board your film for a certain length and not even release it anywhere. They will just have it, they will have the rights to it for the next 10 years, and they will never even bother putting it on different streaming platforms. So you want to make sure that within your contract, there is also always some sort of a delivery timeline. You also want to have certain audit rights. If within the contract it says that you do not have any rights to audit the distributor, that means that the distributor does not need to provide any proof whatsoever that what they are saying is actually true, which means they can tell you that your film is not making any money, even if it is, and you will have no right to audit them to see whether what they're saying is actually true. The other thing is that some distributors will also add into the contract that there will be the assignability of the contract. And what essentially that means is that the distributors will be able to sell your film during that term to another distributor without your permission. So that's another thing that I would definitely avoid when signing the contract. So when you're thinking about the next steps, you're currently thinking about, potentially getting a distributor on board your project, and you don't quite know which one might be right. A great tool for this is IMDb. Go onto IMDb and search for films that are similar to yours. With IMDb Pro, you can do that very, very easily. You can search films by genre, by budget, by type of film, and find films that are as similar to yours as possible. Once you do that, on IMDb, once again, most likely for most of the films that have distribution deals, you'll be able to see who the distributor is, and therefore you'll be able to see what kind of distributors are interested in your films. But the next step is to contact those filmmakers and ask them, what was your relationship like with that distributor? Now, filmmakers love to gossip. They love to talk about their experiences. Therefore, if they had a negative experience, they will definitely reply to you and they will tell you the distributor never paid, the distributor never gave us any kind of reporting. There was very, very, a big lack of communication with the distributor. Therefore, this is definitely something that I would do. I would reach out to the filmmakers who have worked with those distributors and just ask for some general, advice on whether this is a good distributor for you. And if you do that, that is the best way to avoid signing a bad distribution deal. I hope that you guys found this video useful. If you did, please smash that like and subscribe button, and I will see you all at the next video.